So the webinar has. Well, welcome everybody. We're excited to have you here today, and we're gonna just kicking things off in a couple of moments. So I'm excited, Robert. How about you? It's gonna be fun, I think, and very informative for everybody. I think it's a great product, great tool, great integration.
Agreed. I'm humbled to be here today and excited to share this integration.
It's going to be cool. And welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We will, as I say, we're just a little bit early, and we'll probably kick off a couple of minutes late, because by the time, the notifications and things like that, we don't want to miss anything, because it's all going to be good stuff. Whilst we're waiting for everybody to filter in, what time, let's have a prediction. What time do you reckon somebody's going to knock on my door? Do you reckon 35 minutes past 5?
Yeah, the doorbell rings. I usually, I have my door locked so the kids can't come in and out.
It's always, there's the pleasures and the pains of working from home.
That's right.
So thank you so much for everybody who's joining. Just to kind of give everybody a quick update, we will be kicking off very, very shortly. We're just going to leave a little bit of time for everybody to join. I'm excited to see a lot of folks here, and I think it's going to be some pretty great stuff. So you'll be very, very, very happy that you did join. Let's have a look. Bear with me. All right. I think, what do we think? Should we give it one? Let's give it one more minute, and then we will get going. Because it just takes a little time for the notifications and things like that. I hope everybody is well, and I hope everybody's avoiding the hurricane out in Florida. I didn't even know about that until 10 minutes ago. It just goes to show you where I've been busy, but never mind. All right. So let's kind of kick things away, kick things going. So thank you so much for everybody who's joined today, and welcome. We're super pleased to have you here. This is a HashiCorp webinar that we're doing in conjunction with Delphix. And I think this is an incredible thing that you're going to see today, like literally. We're going to be looking at how you can kind of use Terraform and how it integrates with Delphix and the Terraform provider in order to provision sort of on-demand test data, and how you can kind of transform things like that around the capability to deliver sanitized and test databases for users. And why I think this is super interesting is something which is based on my personal experience, which was previously to working with HashiCorp when I was building e-commerce. Test data was incredibly difficult. And it was incredibly difficult for a number of reasons. The predominant one was that we needed the production database because we needed to be able to test against the production database, specifically in instances when we had an outages, because the prod database was probably where the source was. But we also had personally identifiable information inside of that production database. So we can't just be throwing it around, left, right, and center. So what the ops team did was the ops team built, I mean, it was quite a good script. It was quite a clever script to sanitize the data in the production database. It was just very slow, and we also had a huge amount of data. There was terabytes of data, so it took us hours to be able to get a dev copy or a sanitized dev copy of the prod database. which is why I love this solution, because like I swear to you, anybody who has a database has this problem that we're going to kind of show you. The other thing I think was a job previous to that, and again was working in the telecoms industry, exactly the same problem, and it can be really difficult, especially in the sense when you have financial responsibility around the data from the regard of GDPR and other sort of fines and sanctions and things like that. So I'm excited, but I'm going to shut up because I want to introduce to you Robert Henning, who's my co-guest, my guest, and my co-speaker today. And Robert works at Delphix. Robert, please, feel free to introduce yourself. I'm not even going to do you justice by.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. As Nick mentioned, right, I have a real world experience with all the pains that he was just explaining. I was a career DBA for a long time. I would continually get, requests for, over 15 years of, I need to export this data out of prod, copy it over the network into the lower environment. Those SLAs could take 2 days, right? You have ticket approvals. You have to massage the target environment. Do I have enough space to even accommodate the size of that data? Oh, there's PII, as Nick mentioned. Let's import into a scrubbing server, run those manual scripts. As Nick mentioned, were quite clever scripts, but, sometimes they're as good as the people who know the data the best, right? The application owners, are they compliant with what the InfoSec teams are looking for, right? So all these manual processes are, they're complex, they're time consuming, but they're also very risky. And what we're going to show you today is, really a new paradigm shift, a new way of thinking. How do you automate your infrastructure with Terraform and your data with Delphix? Do this in a work smarter, not harder fashion. Automate that data. Have a zero trust mindset when you're moving data around an organization. And really, it's not to replace resources at an organization, right? It's not about taking anyone's job away. It's about, hey, let's repurpose, reallocate these resources to focus on more automation, innovation, add more value to their application teams. So we appreciate all your time today, and I'm ready to get started if you are, Nick.
Awesome. I'm absolutely. I just do want to mention that there is a Q&A box. So if there are any questions that you have as you're going along, we will answer them. So please put your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll get to those as we kind of don't want to completely interrupt the flow throughout there. I'm excited, Robert. Please, why don't you give us, if you don't mind, if you could give us a quick sort of 101 and sort of take us into why this is an important solution and do a little bit more sort of depth before we look at some technical demos.
All right.
Please.
Excellent. Sure. Let's dive right in. So let's talk about what is Delphix, right? So Delphix is all about data, right? It solves for its void in automation and DevOps. So if you think about over the last decade, you have server, storage, software, all of that has been automated, over the last decade, but data really hasn't changed much, right? It's really that missing piece. Growth in production applications have exploded. Data becomes very complicated. You have schema changes, you have data type changes, volume changes, and new transactions are always being entered. So that data, that's embedded in an application's architecture, it's being run in production. To get that data into the right environment in your dev and test beds, as Nick was mentioning, it requires a lot of technology. And that's really where Delphix comes into the picture. We eliminate that wait time around traditionally found with the data. So as I introduced myself, I talked about some of the SLAs when I was a DBA, right? And the 2-day SLA was really best case. You have approvals, upfront, and then you have to, hey, does my target environment have the storage required to get that data, into the lower environment? Then you may have to have a negotiation with the requester, that data consumer. It's like, oh, I want prod data as of 2 days ago. Well, you may run into multiple situations. Oh, is that data on disk? No. Is it on tape? Maybe. If it's not in the tape silo, you may have to order it off site. There's a lot of paperwork, right? You may have to work with the storage team to, allocate a LUN and your systems administrators to create a file system just for you to get that data into that lower environment. That creates a lot of friction around an organization, but a lot of frustration for your data consumers, who need it most. So yeah, again, at Delphix, we eliminate that wait time, moving data fast, frictionless around an organization. Let data flow like water, but do it in a secure manner, right? An intelligent, secure manner where we'll protect the data before it even leaves the production zone. And if you think about non-prod environments, that's usually your largest attack vector in an organization, and it has the softest underbelly, right? It's a big honeypot of data. So people usually have very stringent, tight controls around data in production, but lower environment is really sometimes an afterthought, unfortunately. Well, that's a very big attack vector, and the appetite to go steal that data is really big, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. So again, right, as I mentioned, we organically protect that sensitive data in the source with integrated compliance, and then again, move that data in a secure way for your developers, testers, QA, to develop applications faster, get new releases into those applications faster. So the three industry trends that really shape DevOps TDM today, one is that application releases are accelerating, right? Companies used to follow a waterfall methodology for shipping software. It may take a month or a year to ship software. Then they move to Agile, where you're doing 2-week sprints, bi-weekly releases. And then DevOps, you see really more, you see the daily releases. Today, we're moving to CI/CD, where it's really the past, the present, into the future, where some companies are able to achieve 1 million pipelines a month, right? And that's really achieved with data automation. So the standard by which organizations are judged is really the speed of their application releases. To stay competitive in any industry, you have to respond to market demands lightning fast, right? You can't, the market can't be requesting, a better user experience, customer experience, user experience, new features, new products that you're trying to put in the market. But the speed of your application delivery is hurting your business. Businesses will get crushed, right? How are you going to compete with, the big players in tech today if your data is slow? So anytime you want to release new software, you want to make sure that software works, and to test that the application works, you need the right data in that application. The second trend that we want to talk about today is the modernization of applications across the multi-cloud, right? We used to have all of our applications sitting in traditional data centers. Today with multi-cloud, you have SaaS, PaaS, private, public clouds. So applications are across a broad spectrum at an organization now. This makes it very complex to release applications across these different locations and secure their data. So this is really where HashiCorp, Terraform, and Delphix shine. Neither of our products discriminate where the infrastructure or the data is being provisioned to. And we give the ability to have programmatic control on both your provisioning and the cleanup of your data. The third trend is really moving from a high trust to a zero trust architecture. When organizations had their infrastructure in a data center, what's protecting it? You have 4 walls, maybe an employee badge, and entrusted personnel to guard your applications and your data. Now, as data is moving to the multi-cloud, right, there's other things that are changing that risk when it comes to the data. So the good guys are putting in industry privacy regulations. Think of GDPR, GBLA, CCPA, HIPAA, HITECH. And they levy fines for agencies and organizations who don't comply. You have bad guys, think of hostile nation states, as you see in the middle there. There's ransomware gangs, and they're targeting the data in your unsecured lower environments, right? That's, again, as I mentioned before, that's the largest attack vector of an organization. So think of you may have one production environment and 3 lower environments for every one production or more, right? So you may have 80% of your data in your whole organization sitting in non-prod, and that's your least secure perimeter, right? So that's a big honeypot for these bad actors. And a lot of companies have been crushed, as of recently, right? They're getting hundreds of millions of dollars of fines for leaking PII data, credit cards, social security numbers, email addresses, city, state, zip code, first name, last name, health information, right? I mean, companies could go out of business with just one breach. So, protecting that data in your lower environment, making sure, when you establish your policies and rules around protecting your data, you do it one time and then you do it in a repeatable way, right? So when you're deploying infrastructure with Terraform or data with Delphix, you're establishing those policies up front, and then you can just set it and forget it and know that it's going to be done the right way, in a secure way every time. So those 3 major trends we discussed, right? What's really at stake here? It's the application that needs to be tested, right? So testing becomes very difficult when you get to integration testing, user acceptance testing, performance testing. These get delayed because it's so hard to set up an environment to do this end-to-end testing. The final tests of a release are usually done at the end of a release cycle. And then really it's too late to discover the bugs and fix them before the release date. Some of these programs exceed their budget and they fall behind schedule. If you're able to make these hard test environments and automate them with infrastructure as code and a DevOps platform like Delphix, organizations and agencies can front load this testing earlier in development cycle, right? So at the bottom here, you'll see we're catching errors and fixing bugs early, right? Let's think of a 2-week sprint or early in the day. If you want to release code by the end of the day, it's much less expensive to fix versus promoting that bad code in the prod, and that could be detrimental to your business operations. You can have any type of risk, right? You can have a security breach, your reputational risk, political risk, what have you. At Delphix, we source data across the entire multi-cloud, and then we protect that data and enable it with DevOps APIs. So we make that data immutable from things like ransomware. We also automate the discovery and the masking of anything that's sensitive, as I mentioned before. We enable a zero trust model by design. So the delivery of the data, the integration of the data, the automation and ephemeral test data with tool chains such as Terraform. That's what we're going to demo later today. Both Terraform and Delphix, we improve the utilization by over 10x for application testing. It reduces costs and it really has a green impact. That's good for the environment. How does that happen? Because you're improving the utilization of these test and development environments. How is that possible? Let's think of this. You earmark infrastructure, compute, storage, there's budget that gets allocated for these type of projects, these testing projects, right? Well, that's usually a sunk cost after that's approved, right? You could repurpose environments. Why? Because the average lifetime of these test environments, instead of 24/7 being used over a 1-week period for an hour, you can really hotel this data and infrastructure together, right? Spin up your infrastructure, spin up a server, spin up a database, run a test, spin it down again, right? You could spin up multiple databases on a much smaller number of servers because again, now they're being 100% utilized. So how does Delphix work, right? So we connect to your production applications and databases. So if you read this slide right to left, we pull that data in, we create an immutable timeline. Think of a time machine like a DVR for your data. We give data consumers remote control access. So let's think of 5 people in your family are watching a Netflix movie on different TVs. Well, everybody could be watching the same movie at different points in time, right? The beauty of Delphix is what we can do is also say, hey, okay, I'm a developer. I just made some schema change. I'm going to take a bookmark and share that with my tester, right? We're all watching the same movie at different points in time and the wheel never stops moving, right? So, reducing that friction around an organization is paramount. After we capture that data, right, we capture all change data as well. So we have your data really in near real time, down to the transaction boundary or second. We provide organizations and agencies the ability to provision or rewind to any point in time for development, tests, QA, or integration environments. So when you think about it, we're kind of changing the physics of that data. Data operations, traditionally manual, are now empowered with these API operations, right? They seamlessly integrate with your AI/ML pipelines, DevOps pipelines, SRE tool chains. And again, I live this life, right? The SLAs from refreshing a database were, again, like I said, 2 days at best. And then even provisioning a database, our SLAs were 5 days. Does it take that long to actually stand up a database? No, but there's other integrations that need to happen, such as, again, preparing the server, setting up the backups, any job schedule or auto-assist jobs, stuff like that. And again, changing your mindset is, why do I need to do this manually, right? And then have really your human drift, right? You may have a procedure uploaded on a SharePoint site or a Confluence page that says, here's how you prepare a server for a database. Here's how you deploy a database. You give that to a 100-person team, you're almost guaranteed everyone's going to do it a little bit differently, right? Or maybe one person thinks, hey, well, maybe this step isn't that important. So you may have, 1,000 databases across your environment that were all configured a little bit different. That all gets eliminated really with Terraform and Delphix, where you're deploying things in a consistent, repeatable manner. And again, you set your policies and rules and procedures once up front, and then you know that you have integrity and stability going on into the future. So when we talk about DevOps and CI/CD pipelines, right, there's a few phases to it. So on the left here, you have code being written by developers. They're going to commit the code. And then once that code's committed, when you see here that CI box, you need to build an environment where that code can be tested. So first, the unit testing will happen within the development teams, and you'll have these automated tests that are being triggered as soon as the code is committed or the code is being put into review. At a later stage in the development process, you'll get these systems integration tests, where you're making sure all the different pieces and parts of a release are going to work together. And the continuous delivery piece, when organizations deploy to prod, is outside of Delphix. But after the deployment, if you see on that last column, the SRE, Delphix and Terraform can immediately help in this site reliability engineering. Think of spinning up a root cause analysis environment, where you can, okay, we got an issue in production. Delphix detected, okay, because we're always capturing change data, there's some anomaly or detrimental event. We have clean, pristine, confident data right before that detrimental event happened. We could spin up, again, we could spin up a test bed or a data environment down to the second, right before that event happened. So think of spin up a server with Terraform, put data on it with Delphix, and then your production support team can debug or triage that issue in parallel, right? So no longer are you sitting on, 10-hour calls on a conference call over a weekend or at night. Everyone's pointing fingers or trying to figure out what happened, right? You can reduce your time to recovery in a much quicker fashion. So moving on, so why does all this matter, right? Why does quality data matter in a test environment? So let's take a prod environment. You have your tables, rows, transactions, and then the associated data that's shown here on the screen. As these tables and rows change, so do the schemas in production. So each time you ship software, okay, with a new release, the data is going to change inevitably, right? New features are going to be added to the environment. Think of a column for an invoice ID. If your test environment is stale, let's say it's 90 days old, okay? It might be missing entire columns of data, which results in a mismatch. So for your test cases, you need to have a match with exactly what's going on in production. That's why it's critical to have the right production quality data in your test environments. With Delphix, we rapidly deliver this high quality data into these dev and test environments at the same time you pulled it into production, right? So organizations and agencies will have the correct data, the correct schema, the columns, and then that enables them to do this high quality testing. And Nick, earlier in when you introduced yourself, you've encountered these type of challenges before, right? You've had to, how did some of your code, or how could it be impacted negatively if you're working on a stale data set or a data set that's maybe just a subset?
I mean, it's huge. There's, I think there's a number of issues. There's kind of one of the issues that generally the way that we used to work with our test and our kind of our dev quality data was, it was mocked, right? Like at some point, somebody had basically just entered garbage into the system. And that isn't reflective. So there's a number of issues with that. One is you don't have the volume of data. So when I'm writing a SQL query, or I'm writing like a data selection query using an ORM or something like that, then it's really hard for me to judge the performance of what that query is going to be. So I mean, if I write accidentally an n star query, when I'm running against my couple of hundred record test data, it's fine because the database can just throw everything into memory. But when I start to run that in production and you see that bad query and it's running against terabytes worth of data and millions of rows, then the effect of that query is, the impact of it is ginormous. So you can even find that incidents like that they don't get caught until they hit production, because in my experience and the way that we worked, because we just couldn't manage this process, the data we were testing against and the data we were working with as developers was nowhere near reflective of production. Yet people were still surprised when you deploy code that's tested, it hits prod, and then it's broken. And so I'm like, this is literally like revolutionary. It's a revelation. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The other thing I kind of want to bring up as well is, which I think is really interesting, is, well, firstly, that you mentioned a point which I never even thought about, which is that if you're kind of like running stuff like pulling your prod data into a dev environment, you're putting your most secure data into your least secure environments.
That's right.
I've literally never thought about that before in that way, and I mean, so true. But onto the testing, I think one of the other issues that you have is that, to do a test, or to kind of be scientific about testing, you need to repeat it multiple times. And in order to repeat it multiple times, well, generally a test will mutate the data source. So therefore, the second run of that test is not against the same conditions as the first, because it's mutated data. And it's just so incredibly slow and difficult to get a refresh of the data that you just have to deal with those things. So it actually reduces the efficacy of your testing, which well, I didn't even know that was coming.
Yeah, I mean, you're a wizard with forecasting. I mean, excellent segue, right? I mean, think of Nick's experience where, again, being able to re-baseline that data, a fast environment cleanup after testing, that's really where, one of Delphix core competencies, that's where we shine, right? You can leverage a Delphix API to bookmark your data and then quickly rewind it, re-baseline it, right? So let's say you're running a test, exactly as Nick was mentioning, right? Take a batch job. You have a destructive test, or you're loading transactions to see how the application responds. You're going to change the data. right? As Nick mentioned, that's inevitable. So once that state has changed, you don't no longer have that pristine environment to run another test. So that data that's been changed by the batch job or destructive test, now you can quickly revert it with an API call or the click of a rewind button, right? And revert it back to its original state. And this, this doesn't matter if you have a 100 terabyte database, we can reset it in 2 minutes, right? And we'll get into a little bit of that later, and we can take some of that on the Q&A on how that's even possible. But again, being able to rewind your tests, why is this important? Well, before a release, if you can only run 5 or 6 tests in a 2-week period, you're kind of confident. Maybe you're confident that that data that you paired with your code is going to act and behave the same way when you actually go live or have your go no go call for your release. But if you could run, if your tests are only 2 or 3, if your rewinds are only 2 or 3 minutes versus 8 hours, you could run 500, 600, 700 tests before a release and be, extremely confident that you could sleep at night after that release happens, right? You've tested every edge case with all of the data. There's no data that was truncated or subset or let off the table in your testing. And then you can also take a single environment, right? That would take a long time to reset and quickly recycle that data for repeated testing, right? And you can make it behave like multiple environments as long as you're able to chain the test together.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's so important. I mean, literally the entire focus that I've just spent the last, I would say probably the last 12 months looking at is about reliability in production from a failure perspective. So how do you actually safely fail an application in production? I mean, the safest way to fail an application in production is that it doesn't fail in the first instance, right? And that
That's right.
Testing in prod is not really like, it's important, and there's no condition like prod, but ideally, it's not, it's a seatbelt, right? It's not something you want to use all of the time. It's like the last case. And to your point, like stress, like just having the confidence that I can deploy and I don't need to worry because I'm confident in my testing. That in itself is huge.
That's right. I mean, even it's really not even your data, right? It's like, think of, I've worked on many weekend exercises as a DBA in my career, rehearsing database upgrades, right? And the upgrade was good and everything shook out fine, and we ran some tests, and then 12, 13 hours later, right, I'm woken up in the middle of the night and be like, we need to roll back, right? With Delphix, right, and I've done this, you could rehearse not just releases, but database upgrades, right? You could quickly spin up virtual databases across all database types, right? How's this next major release going to behave against my application? Spin up a VDB, with the upgraded binaries, connect your application to it, run a functional test. You could do this at scale, right? So
that's another thing I never thought about. So actually, from using this process, you've actually got the ability to test database upgrades, because you can safely move the data to a new version of the database to be able to test things. And I guess when it comes to, from a DBA's role of performance tuning as well, you can actually do performance tuning against a sort of a sanitized data, but of production depth.
That's right.
Which is essential. As I said, like, you can't do query plan analysis against data which is a fraction of the scale. Well, not effectively anyway. I digress. People are pretty desperate to see some demos.
Yep. So yeah, we're definitely coming right up to it. So really, to tie all this in, right? So we HashiCorp and Delphix, we have a Terraform provider for Delphix. So we're looking at this workflow. You'll see a code build trigger to both deploy infrastructure created by Terraform, which can be done again across any cloud, and our Terraform provider for Delphix that's provisioning end-to-end data environments in parallel. So these environments are ready to perform automated testing again, removing those friction points to request infrastructure from a system administrator and a DBA. Again, multiple days, right, to do these things. Multiple days to do these things without Terraform and Delphix, right? Doing this manually is painful. Again, I've lived it.
It's not reproducible.
Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And everyone's doing it differently, right? Where's the standardization? Where's the consistency, right? You know, again, I worked on a 100-person team, right, of database administrators. Is the management and leadership really confident that everyone's going to do it exactly the same way? You know, you put a procedure up and you publish a procedure and you hope, right? But what if this person doesn't think that this step is important, right? And I'm just talking from a server configuration perspective, right? So leveraging Terraform, like for me, this was really a blessing, right? You standardize everything up front and then you do it in a repeatable way. We were building out a disaster recovery environment in another region of the country. And, you know, yes, there was a procedure published, but is everyone doing exactly the same, right? Not only are you saving a tremendous amount of time doing it with Terraform, but you're making sure everything is 100% consistent, right? And with Delphix, you're doing the same thing with your data. You don't have any configuration drift, right? With Terraform, which can also detect these drifts, right? And then with Delphix, because you're able to provision data from a very precise point in time down to the transaction or second, really you don't have any data drift with your code either.
Yeah.
Right. You're really pairing your data with your code.
And for the two core things I think we've mentioned around security and testing, both that consistency is absolutely essential. I mean,
That's right.
If you want to do effective testing, got to have consistency and reproducibility around your testing environments. And if you want things secure, you've got to be able to have a replayable process to make sure that there's no deviation from the plan.
That's right. That's right. So with our provider, our Terraform provider for Delphix, right, we can orchestrate all these DevOps operations that you see up top here, you know, for one to many Delphix engines with all these APIs. And then again, organizations, agencies can manage the deployment of their data, accelerate these high quality releases, and then allow you to perform exponentially more CI/CD runs, right? So no longer are you, you know, constrained by this, you know, waterfall, agile DevOps timeframes, right? You could release code as early and often as fast as you like. So this is our last slide right before the demo, but really what I want you to take away from this, right, is, you know, it's all about the developer and enabling, empowering the programmers, right? You know, programmers today, you really just need to simply provide your desired end state, right? And Terraform is going to take care of the rest for you, right? Including the handling of any dependencies. So there's really no need to follow a set of instructions between state A, where you have nothing, and B, where you can deploy a stack of resources in an automated way. So, you know, the analogy I like to use is, hey, I'm going to drive cross country, right? Where you know, traditionally you'd have to map out everything turn by turn with a map. Yes, sometimes people follow a GPS, but Terraform is really the equivalent of a ride share, right? You pick, where do I want to go? This is my destination, and you arrive without worrying about the directions in between, right? So these tests that are shown on the screen here are typical workflows that our customers achieve when they automate their infrastructure and data in harmony, right? App dev teams can work in parallel. They can run exponentially more tests. Again, as I said before, catching those bugs earlier in the release cycle. You know, developers, testers, QA, they could set bookmarks, share bookmarks at various milestones in their own personal data pods. And then again, you know, work in a more collaborative manner, work better in harmony together, right? Nobody's waiting for an environment anymore, right? There's no noisy neighbor problem. People aren't stepping on each other's toes. Everybody can have their own copy of the data, but then again, share their success from their own personal data pods, right? The testers say, oh, hey, you know, the developer made a schema change, share that bookmark with the tester imports it in their own environment. Tester said, oh, hey, I found a bug. Let me share that back with the developer, right? The wheel never stops moving. Everybody's working in a more intelligent way. So now it's time for our live demo. I'll stop here. Nick, do you want to expand on anything that I was talking about before I start?
Well, no, I think it was a really great analogy. I would kind of go on to add and say that I think one of the benefits of Terraform is that what you get in terms of a process which can be applied without a great deal of knowledge of what's going on under the hood. So it's an accessible process, is that you also get something which is consistently defined. So if you do need to understand a process and dig into it, you can read the Terraform code. And I personally find HCL very, very readable. And I've been working with it a while, so it could just be my eyes. But I find it sort of very readable. And one of the things, it's in some ways self-documenting your processes, whereas I've dealt with playbooks and things like that which have just been like stored in markdown files, text files, even checked into Git. They're very good, but there's always an instance when I can miss a step. And I do it all the time. Like, I give live demos and things like that all of the time. And I write a script and things like that for my live demo. I did one just last week. The live demo wasn't working. And I'm like, well, why is the live demo not working? And then, it suddenly clicks, well, I've missed a step in my own script, which I'd just gone through 1,000 times myself, so having that reproducibility and the consistency and the ability to kind of test your playbooks as well, I think is incredibly important. We've got a great question about database virtualization, actually, but I'll let you get on with the demo. I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No problem. Yeah, we'll take that question at the end. We appreciate everybody's interaction. So what I'm showing here again is Terraform Cloud. I fell in love with this product, and really just kind of the light bulb went off in my head on how excellent this was. Think of an organization where you have multiple users using Terraform, but maybe in isolation, right? With Terraform Cloud, you could set up different workspaces around your organization, but apply that governance and those controls to each individual workspace. So all those team members are working and doing things in a repeatable, consistent way. So I have a workspace here that is going to fuel our demo today. What we're going to do, right? And for those of you who aren't familiar with Terraform Cloud, Terraform Cloud is calling remote code. Okay, so I have my main TF file here. So what we're going to do is I just have a little code block mapping my organization and my workspace back to Terraform Cloud. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to discover a server in the Delphix engine. We're going to provision a virtual database on that server. And then we're going to associate that virtual database with a group where you can do some batch operations. Okay, so everything I'm doing in Terraform Cloud is going to be calling this remote code. Okay, here I have my Delphix engine. This is the front end, really where your data operators, your Delphix administrator. Sorry, Nick.
Robert, sorry, bud. Could you just bounce the font size up? If you do, if you're on a Mac, I think Command Plus will probably just zoom up a couple of points there on the.
You want to look
UI.
at the main TF file?
Yeah, I think there's just a comment just from somebody just to kind of have a look to zoom it up. I think we're finding it a little bit difficult to see the.
Can you see it better now?
I can indeed, and I can.
Okay. So here are the resources that we're going to be invoking today. Okay, so moving back again, this is our front end of our Delphix engine. Traditionally, like I said, your Delphix administrators, operators would be creating environments or provisioning VDBs for your data consumers, and then your data consumers will have that self-service control with another layer, again, that we call self-service. But what I want you to take away from this is I'm not going to click any buttons at all whatsoever on this engine. Everything's going to be fully automated, calling our APIs, okay, with our Terraform provider for Delphix. So going into my workspace here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new run, right? I'm just going to call this webinar dry run, excuse me, webinar run, start run. So now all of the resources that you saw in our main TF file, okay, they will be expanded upon here. We can look at and just give yourself a confident verification of everything you're going to be deploying. Okay, so if you can see here, here's a Oracle target environment, right? This is just a traditional Linux VM. And just to show you what VM I'm going to be deploying, this is the virtual machine running Linux, running Oracle binaries. We're going to discover this server into the Delphix engine and then put data on it, okay? Now, again, with Terraform, of course, you could spin up the server in an automated way. And as we showed with the aforementioned workflow, think of a developer would commit their code, trigger a build. You're calling Terraform to provision these resources for you and then calling Delphix to put that data there. So I'm going to go ahead and confirm and apply. I'm going to confirm my plan. We can see our apply is pending. Now our apply is running. Okay, and again, all of those resources will now be provisioned. Now going back to my Delphix engine, again, I've touched nothing whatsoever. Fully automated, fully API. I'm creating an environment, creating a server for Delphix to provision data to.
It doesn't matter how many times I've seen this, it's still magical. I still love, the way that Terraform works like that.
It's excellent. I mean, it's really, it's a game changer for sure. For somebody who, again, used to be boots on the ground doing this with paperwork and digital tickets, negotiating with multiple teams, waiting for someone to even pick up the request.
Well, it's a parallelism as well, right? I mean, you don't even need to define it. You can, if you need to snapshot a number of databases, because I mean, if you're spinning up a test environment, chances are you might not have a database, you might have a number of them, and the ability to kind of do this in parallel and have the assurances that it's all just going to kind of work and that you don't need to manage it is a phenomenal way to interact with Delphix, on my personal opinion anyway.
That's right. So if you see here now, we already discovered that environment to provision the data to. We already discovered that Linux server. Now we're provisioning the virtual database on that server. So just to show you what server are we provisioning it to, again, this is the one. All I have here is Oracle 19C binaries run. As soon as this virtual database is created, I'm going to go and just show you that how fast we stood up the database. I'll run a SQL Plus, run a few sample queries there to show you, again, we were able to provision a full database copy in just a number of minutes. And again, it doesn't matter how large your database is. You can have a 1 terabyte source or a 100 terabyte source or a 500 terabyte source. We could spin up these databases in just a few minutes.
So I've got a couple of questions actually, which have just come
Sure.
in, which are related to this. And the first one is around performance. So how do the virtual databases, how are they comparable to the kind of the source data store? Because if we were talking about things like doing performance tuning and testing and things like that, can you do basically a like for like? Or is there a limitation around some of those things?
Sure. So majority of our users, will use us to accelerate, application development. Okay. Delphix traditionally shines in dev, test, QA environments. There are some customers who, do run production workloads, and there's some things that, let's talk about Oracle, for example, right? There are tips that you can use that say enabling DNFS, secondary or backup interfaces to the Delphix engine so you can get consistent throughput. Enabling jumbo frames or something like that, right? So, we could really, drive, a lot of power out of these virtual databases, and you could tune these databases just like a physical would, right? We store your parameter files in the Delphix engine. You can make any adjustments that you need. And these virtual databases look, feel, and behave just like a physical database would. right? So if your DBA was doing administration on these databases, the end user experience never changes, but most importantly, your data consumer, their experience never changes either, right? The way they connect to the database doesn't change. It still lives on the same server, the same port. You know, the added value, right, is these DevOps operations, right? The fast rewind, fast provision, fast restore, automated masking.
Yeah. And in terms of the size, do I have the ability that I can actually take a subset? So for example, say I've got, I don't know, 10 terabytes of data, but could I just say I just want a terabyte randomly selected of that for my dev and test environments, or am I kind of?
That's a great question. So, you know, you're definitely not constrained there. Out of the box, we're not a subsetting tool, and there's a good reason for that, right? The reason is we believe, right? Not believe, it's been proven that when you're able to give, you know, a full production, a full set end to end of your production database in exponentially smaller the size, but already secure and automatically identified where the risk lied, masked all your sensitive data, and open that to your lower environments. Again, now you're developing much higher quality applications, right? If you're giving stale data and or subsets of data, you're missing the big picture, okay?
So actually using this technique using Delphix could actually just enable me to not have to deal with the subsets because of size limitation, because it's not a problem anymore.
That's right.
I hope that's a good sort of answer, or I don't know whether the subsetting was something which there was a very specific reason other than just availability of space.
Right. Well, again, because we make these virtual databases so small, again, we don't really have to worry about subsetting, but if you do want to do subsetting, we allow you to automate any type of operation you want to do with something we call hook points, okay? So what you can do is maybe let's say, okay, I provisioned all my 10 schemas into a virtual database, but I only want to keep 5. You could call a hook and then drop out those schemas that you don't want. So before we even open the database for read or write access, all these hook points would get invoked, and then your data will be at the state that you want when it's complete.
Nice.
So now that the virtual data, again, provision, the apply is finished. We provision the virtual database in just a few minutes. Everything is complete. I'm going to go ahead and earlier, I just set up my environment variables here already. I'm just going to go.
Can you just zoom that? Can you just zoom that in a bit, bud?
Sorry.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yep. I'm just going to go ahead and SQL. I started typing, and I'll zoom it in when I'm done.
No worries.
I'm just going to SQL plus into this database to show you, hey, it didn't exist before. I grep for the system processes. I'll just do select name, log mode, open, database, role from $, database. So I have a VDB called VDBTF already open for archive log, open read and write. And then we have all the data files, right? Select file name. We have the full database from the source already provisioned. Now, here's the magic, right? That fast provision, we stood up a test bed. Let's put our, developer hat on and say, okay, committed my code, triggered a build. I made some schema change. My tester's going to go ahead and run a test on this environment. The test is complete. We have our bookmark that we need. We can roll back to any time. Going back to Terraform Cloud, as fast as we spun it up, we could spin it down again too. Okay, so I can just go ahead and run a destroy. Okay, and simply select my workspace name here, queue up my destroy plan. And again, what I want. Go ahead, Nick, sir.
Oh, no, I was going to say away it goes. It's gone. Yeah.
Yep. And once I queue up my destroy plan, I'll confirm the plan. Again, I'm going to delete all of my resources that were provisioned. Okay. And what I want you to take away again is I am not touching anything whatsoever in this engine. Everything is driven through APIs. So think of the automation possibilities to do that. And again, I live this life, the SLAs for decommissioning, right? A lot of negotiation, like, a lot of digital paperwork that needs to happen to delete an environment. That SLA could be a few days too. Or even think of the hesitation some application teams may have when we're like, well, let's say I'm retiring a data warehouse, right? Well, we have a new data warehouse, but I'm retiring another one. And the hesitation was, well, maybe we need to query that data into the future for, some legal or audit purposes, or I'm going to put it on tape for like a 7-year retention, right? You can archive your data with Delphix. Before I decommission a database, ingest it into Delphix, just disable it, right?
Well, I mean, you just created a test database for me there in the time or less time that it takes a popular Seattle coffee chain to make me a pumpkin spice latte. Whereas the last time that somebody did that for me, I flew to Brazil, spent a fortnight by the beach, came home, and it still hadn't been done. So like to your point around the fear of destroying environments, it's not irrational. I mean, as a developer, you're under pressure. Everybody's under pressure. You're under pressure to deliver. The last thing you need is to lose a day or two because you don't have data. And because of that, there becomes like a fear, and you get this protectionism around things where people just like, don't touch my environment, and that's not healthy, and it's not effective, because you should be able to kind of spin things up and turn them down. And this, well, we've just seen like, let's say 8 minutes to create and destroy.
That's right.
We've got a question around kind of just working with a database server or an application server. How about integration to other? I mean, I think from an integration perspective, what you're getting with the sort of the Delphix virtual with a sanitized database is something that you just connect to from the other applications in your test environment. So you'll spin up your dev or your test environment using your Terraform, which will consist of your multiple servers, potentially your multiple data stores, things like queues, maybe some Lambdas, and all of the varying other bits and pieces that go into a sort of a modern cloud or modern hybrid environment. All you're really kind of doing here is just substituting part of it. So instead of spinning up yet another RDS instance, well, you're just provisioning that data store with the sanitized data using Delphix. So it doesn't affect the way that you build your dev and test environments, which need to be as close to, don't necessarily have to be all encompassing in terms of production, but they've got to cover the surface area of the feature that you're writing, which is incredible. We've got another couple of questions here. So we've got, if as an end user, if we want to implement with a SQL Server setup, is there documentation of doing a POC? So I think, again, that question is just related to, could we take this? Could we take the sort of the sanitized, or maybe in the virtualized data, the sanitized from the VDB? Could we just pump that into a physical database instance? I guess you could just do that through your standard sort of database migration, like be it a backup or an Octopus script or something like that, if that was something that you wanted to do.
That's right. Yeah, we actually have a beautiful functionality and feature called VDP, where let's say that you spin up a virtual database. That's a great question, by the way. You spin up a virtual database and you want to rehydrate a physical copy. Okay, Delphix can take that virtual database and start writing those blocks out to a physical server for, let's say, load testing purposes, or let's say you even have an outage, right? Think of you had a whole region outage or a data center outage, and now you have this immutable timeline in Delphix. Delphix can spin that database up for you in just a few minutes, and for a temporary time, point your application back to that virtual database and get your business up and running again. But then in parallel, start rehydrating a physical database from a virtual copy.
Yeah, and of course that takes a lot longer than just being able to do the beauty of being able to do things in a virtualized way is speed, right? I mean, it's but But yeah, as to the sort of the comments in the chat, it comes at a sort of a cost of comparable performance. But if that is something that you need to do, and then it is possible to do it. You just have to kind of accept with the extra strength, extra steps on there. What else we got on here? So we've got a question here which says, is there any plan to expand log sync beyond Oracle, specifically looking at SQL Server? I'm thinking someone's maybe asking you for a feature request or so there.
Sure. So natively, we do replay your transaction logs with SQL Server, right? So we do have that, fine-grained immutable timeline and fine-grained recovery and provision for SQL Server. So, not only are we querying your production source and when that backup occurred, we're also fetching your key logs, on an ongoing iterative basis.
Yeah. And we've got a sort of a good question here as well, which is around replication. So how does kind of say I have a data store which is running a hot standby and replication. Can I kind of, I suppose, replicate that approach with a sort of a virtualized solution in order to, again, I'm guessing, Alex, I do apologize, but is it specifically, are you thinking around being able to kind of test things like the replication process and configuration and stuff like that, or maybe the ability to do hot failover and stuff? Right, too.
We're also available. We could put our emails in the chat, and anyone who didn't have a question that was answered, you can feel free to email both me, or Nick or any of our other panelists here, and happy to continue this discussion.
I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think it's a great tool, something I genuinely wish I'd had access to when I had to deal with production systems. I could literally talk to you all evening or all morning, depending on where you are in the world. We could probably discuss this until the cows come home, but we will send out the recording. We will also kind of make sure, there's, if you want to speak to us, please feel free to reach out to us and ask any questions that may be missed or things that you just kind of thought about after the fact. If anybody is wondering, my doorbell went at 5:10 and my dog barked for approximately 3 minutes. Robert, I'm delighted to have spent some time with you today, and thank you so much. Like, I think this is great. Oh, hang on, do we have one more question? Yes, so just specifically on the replication, just to kind of clarify there, it is about being able to kind of replication between DBs and kind of being able to, with the bookmarks and rollbacks, and I don't know much about that.
So we can expand a little bit more on replication of the data between Delphix engines. Again, whether that's on-prem to the cloud, between clouds. Again, we move that data in a very lightweight way. So your cloud costs, or even let's say you have 2 engines in the cloud, our cloud costs are significantly reduced too, right? Because we're compressing and virtualizing those blocks too, and we're only moving maybe kilobytes or megabytes of data from huge data stores, right? So if you wanted to replicate between VDBs, these VDBs look, breathe, operate just like a physical database would. I guess what you would want to consider is, if somebody's time traveling, your source database and target database, those are some considerations that, you need to think about, right? It's, traditionally in a production and a hot standby, right? Any changes happening in production, organically copying those logs to a target server, and then replaying those logs and keeping everything in symmetry. You can ingest your data from that replicated standby, right? If you say, oh, well, we have a zero trust production model, I don't want Delphix to pull my data from prod. we can take, say, like from a physical standby that's open for read-only with apply, pull that data into there, and then provision all your virtual databases from there. Or we could do it from a backup, right? So how we get your data, it's virtually limitless.
Nice. Well, we could literally chat for days, but we're at the top of the hour, and folks have probably desperate to run away. I will give one last call for questions. If anybody has any, better be quick because we're gonna have to go. Well, thank you so much, Robert. Definitely check out
Thank you.
Delphix, folks, and also check out Terraform Cloud. They are literally just perfectly made to work together, and I think it's exciting to be able to see yet more ability to do solving really complicated problems with infrastructure automation. It's a great time to be alive from that regard, I think.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you so much,
everybody.
Robert.
Thanks,
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you all later. Bye.